Fidel Castro is probably one of the most iconic revolutionary leaders, which is hilarious because at the beginning it is unlikely that he would ever have thrown himself into the arms of the Soviet Union had the US not been hell-bent on controlling its collar, being the totally independent nation of Cuba that definitely wasn't being pushed around like a pet. Anyway, Castro is often remembered for his commanding speeches, military fatigues, having that one really big in his cabinet that for some reason university students fetishize, his cigars, and his role in reshaping Cuba's political landscape. Yet, behind the facade, El Presidente here had one true passion. An unexpected passion. No, not surviving CIA plots, he was good at that, but I of course refer to his obsession with dairy. An obsession so strong that it would impact Cuba's entire agricultural future and would lead to, I kid you not, cow genetics. As with most Cubans from rural parts of the island in this era, Castro was exposed to farming and livestock from an early age. It was just a fact of life. This connection to the land defined much of his adult life, particularly his fondness for cattle and their byproducts. Two particular favourites of his was
cheese
and, of course, ice cream. Castro really liked ice cream. And I mean, like, he needed it to live like a potato needs the soil. Reportedly, Castro would consume copious amounts of ice cream, quite literally more than the main character of a Hallmark movie who just got rejected by their crush, sometimes insisting on having dozens of scoops in one sitting, as in dozens of scoops to the point where he had multiple pints in one sitting. This fondness for dairy wasn't just an indulgence though. See, for Castro, dairy evolved into a symbol of his vision for Cuba, blending his personal love for milk with his political commitment to self-sufficiency. When Castro took power, he instructed his government that Cuba, to become a modern and powerful nation, would need to undertake ambitious cultural initiatives, not unlike that of other communist nations. For Castro though, it wasn't grain that was the subject of his desire, rather it was the sweet white nectar of the cow. No, not that, get your mind out of the gutter. Castro's great vision was that these reforms would turn Cuba into a dairy powerhouse, capable of producing enough milk and cheese not only for its citizens, but also for export. Think Ukraine and grain, but Castro has this plan with Cuba and milk. But the problem with this grand plan is that cows are big, and they like to eat a lot of food, and that Cuba is hot. And to have milk, you need to have the cows get milk through, cow mummy and cow daddy special times. But no matter, Castro had a plan. Cow genetics. One of the most infamous initiatives was Castro's attempt to breed a super cow, capable of producing extraordinary amounts of milk. See, the thing is, the cows that were in Cuba before Castro took power weren't really known for their milk production, and that just comes down to their breed. See, they had evolved from Spanish and Indian cows to live in hot climates, so they were perfectly suited to the Caribbean. To fix this severe lack of cow juice, Castro purchased a bunch of Holstein dairy cows from the Canadians. The stereotypical kind of spotty cow that you sort of see in movies and stuff. But they were Canadian cows, so the temperature was no bueno. Castro, being Castro, then built a giant air-conditioned cow mansion for his babies to live in. But that was expensive, so his solution was to get the Cuban intellectuals together and have them breed the heat-resistant cows that were being bred for their meat with the super juicy cows in some sort of Minecraft crafting table sort of event. This didn't really work. Save for one instance. Ubre Blanca, the white udder, a cow that became the national symbol of Cuba's agricultural ambitions. Ubre Blanca shattered records for milk production, reportedly producing over 100 litres of milk in a single day. Her achievements were celebrated, and she became the source of pride for the nation, a testament to Castro's determination to achieve dairy supremacy. Castro would tell the world in speeches just how amazing this cow was, referring to Ubre Blanca as an example of communism's superior breeding skills. No, just don't even go there. Don't even go there. And to many Cubans, this cow symbolizes the special period in Cuban history, a time where everything felt and looked positive. That is before the economic collapse began in 1989. Castro's obsession with Ubre Blanca extended far beyond her record-breaking milk production. The cow was treated quite literally like royalty, with special care and attention given to her diet and living conditions. When the inevitable happened and Ubre Blanca went to the great grass field in the sky, she was immortalized with a marble statue and earned a place in Cuban folklore. And just like other great symbols of communism, Blanca was embalmed and placed in a glass climate-controlled case at the National Cattle Health Center, where her remains are still on display today, in some sort of Lenin-esque cow display. Cuban scientists would attempt to clone Blanca with frozen tissue samples, but so far all attempts have in fact failed. Blanca also is kind of famous in Poland for a litany of reasons. It's kind of complicated, but there are poems written about Blanca and the Polish media. It's an interesting series of events. However, this dairy-centric vision was not without challenges, and the success of Ubre Blanca was not to be repeated on a large scale. The broader agricultural system struggled under the weight of unrealistic goals, limited resources, and the US embargo. Despite this though, Castro remained steadfast in his belief that dairy could transform Cuba's economy and society. You see, if the big cows were failing, what if every Cuban had access to their own cow? It would solve the supply chain issues, right? And every family would have milk, but cows are big. So what if you could genetically engineer a mini cow? I will try and explain this next bit without crying from laughter. But yes, Fidel Castro attempted to order his scientists to genetically engineer cows to be smaller, as in dog size, with the same yield of bigger cows. The idea was that cows could be bred so small that they could live in people's apartments, like on balconies and stuff, eat tiny bits of grass like a puppy in a bowl, and to absolutely nobody's shock, this didn't work. But he didn't end up killing half his population on cow-related adventures, so he's doing better than some other communist nations with animal problems, not looking at anyone in particular, China. Cows cannot in fact be bred to be puppy-sized to live in your apartment. But if you thought this was the end of Castro's dairy shenanigans, the failure of his genetically engineered super mini cows, no. We're not even getting started because we've talked about getting the milk, but what do you do with it? Special cow breeding programs aside, Castro would make ice cream and dairy quite literally a part of everyday Cuban life, from the lowest of peasants to the highest of diplomatic meetings. If a foreign ambassador showed up, he would ply them with insane amounts of ice cream, so much so that a lactose intolerant person would probably explode. I say explode because, let's be honest, there is no lactose intolerant person in the world who at any given point will just turn around and go stuff it, worth it, and eat their weight in ice cream. Not looking at anyone in particular, the aunt of my children. The most famous example of dairy hospitality that gets shared regarding Castro though is the genuine argument that he had with the French ambassador, where Castro went out of his way to try and force the Frenchman to admit that his cheese was better than French cheese, pushing it so far that it was close to causing an international incident over cheese. But it gets better, because Castro had a special place to actually host these diplomats. That leads us to the Cuban equivalent of Dairy Queen. During the last few decades of the Cold War, the Romanian dictator Ceausescu travelled to North Korea, which at the time was kind of a semi-normal okay in terms of communist nations for its citizens. And there he first saw the cult of personality that the Kim family had built, along with their great structures and plans for the future. Needing to compensate himself, he went back to Romania, bulldozed a giant part of Bucharest, and then built a building so big that it directly led to the fall of his government, his execution on Christmas Day, and the modern state of Romania having a building so big it can't afford to keep the whole thing lit because it's ungodly huge. Heaviest building in the world, mind you. Why am I telling you this? Because it was a thing in communist societies to build these mega structures. The Soviet Union planned its own too, clearing space to build the Grand Palace of the Soviets until, the Austrian corporal showed up. In East Germany, they built a giant pointy tower in the sky that's still there. In Cuba, though, it was a little different, because Castro's megastructure, Coppelia, wasn't a grand hall or palace. It was a giant ice cream parlor. Shortly after taking over the reins of power, Castro set about implementing his revolutionary ideals, and at the top of the list was dairy. Now, we already spoke about the cows and how to get the liquid so craved by El Jefe, but to serve it, he envisioned something truly special. So in 1966, Castro ordered that an entire city block be cleared on the site of the old Reina Mercedes Hospital, and in its place, the megastructure was built. Coppelia, named for the ballet of the same name, a favourite of Castro's secretary and a revolutionary, Coppelia is genuinely huge. It can seat up to 1,000 people, and when it was founded, it could serve 26 flavours to tens of thousands of Cubans every single day. But the optics, and I'll be honest, aren't great. See, this was built in a relatively poor area, and this many fridges are extremely expensive to run. Coppelia would not be part of Castro's architecture for the future. Rather, it stands out just as another communist megastructure, like the People's Palace or the Palace of the Soviets. It just doesn't really fit. And it costs too much. The modern structure still exists, mind you, although today it can only really serve a single flavour at a time, and the lineup to get ice cream isn't exactly quick, but Coppelia does struggle on. It's actually in talks at the moment to expand into Venezuela. Because, of course it is, because Venezuela's in a fantastic position right now to start giant ice cream parlours. Today though, Fidel Castro's obsession is really nothing more than a footnote. A hilarious footnote in history, mind you, but a footnote nonetheless. In the grand scheme of things, it really isn't anything to write home about. The best part about it, though, is that at the end of the day, the man who defied the CIA's unending assassination attempts, who told the United States to get bent and fought off the Bay of Pigs, was completely and utterly obsessed with something so simple as dairy. It almost baffles the mind just how obsessed he was, and to be honest, when I see the cost of Ben & Jerry's, I kind of understand how communism and ice cream goes together. Yeah, look at that. Doesn't it make you just want to... Alright, cheeky little bonus story at the end here. Because, you can't talk about Castro and not include the CIA. So, after the Bay of Pigs invasion went to absolute hell, the CIA considered using Castro's dairy obsession to assassinate him. See, it was discovered that Castro would every single day get a gigantic chocolate milkshake from the Havana Libre Hotel. The deputy director of the CIA, Richard Bissell Jr., discovering this, went to the heads of the Chicago and Tampa crime families and offered them $150,000 in 1962 money, so well into the millions today, which is a fortune, to assassinate Castro by putting botulinum toxin, aka spicy Botox, in his chocolate milkshake. I just want to point out, Castro drinks a giant chocolate milkshake every single day, right? He then eats 2 pints of ice cream after dinner. How many cows had to serve this man? All was going well until the worker at the hotel who got the pill of the Botox put it in the freezer, for some reason, where it promptly hardened, shattered open, and spilled everywhere. Yet again, the one of 600 alleged assassination attempts to get Castro ended in a Looney Tunes-esque failure. And that is the tale of Castro and his cows. It's one of the more fun stories from history, and after all the depressing things we have covered lately, the politics, things that occur that I can't say the G word for because YouTube doesn't like me much at the moment, I thought we could use a fun story. As for the truck campaign, just as an addendum, at the time of recording we've raised over 51,000 euros, which is just completely mental. That is 4 fully funded vehicles and nearly a fifth. It would be 55,000 to get the fifth, but it's not something I'm going to be pushing for because I believe you guys have done so much. One of these trucks is already at work in Ukraine, so thank you all so much for that. And I will include some pictures as you're watching here. It's our truck that we funded together. The fundraiser itself will be live for the next few weeks, and it has been joined by Hard Thrasher and Animarchy to help get it over the line. Amongst others, of course. But to this community, I just want to say thank you. We've completely smashed our goals. Also, if I sound weird, it's because I've had both COVID and the flu in the same month, and I'm only just getting to the point where I don't sound like a nasally twat the whole time, so I thought I'd finally get around to making you a video because let's be real, I've been a bit lazy. Last little bit, we're a hair away from 100,000 subs, so thank you all for that. You guys are amazing. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Happy milk drinking.